Gentleman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Kentucky for his work on this bill and his input on the card processing piece of the legislation. I'd like to yield now 3 minutes to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, who's been really he's put the effort together across a whole range of cannabis issues, and I thank him for his steadfast work on this subject. I yield to the gentleman.
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I would like unanimous consent to enter in the record a statement commemorating the life and accomplishments of Steve Fox, a pioneering cannabis legalization activist and activist without whose efforts we wouldn't be here today, who tragically passed away last week.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to be here with my friend, Mr. Perlmutter, and the bipartisan support that we're seeing evidence. Mr. Stivers, we're going to hear from a moment from the distinguished gentleman from Ohio who's been a champion. This is an issue that, sadly, I feel my good friend from North Carolina could have given the speech 25 years ago. But the legalization train has left the station. This is a business in the United States that has approaching $20 billion of revenue this year. There are, as is pointed out, 97% of the American public has access to some form of legal cannabis. Medical cannabis, 4 million patients utilize it. Mr. Speaker, this is an issue that has arrived, and it is being captive of the past practice, pretending that the federal government can wish away the legalization of this subject. That can't. The flawed federal policies create serious, serious problems. As Mr. Perlmutter pointed out, we've had over 100 robberies in my community, including a fatality. These cash-only enterprises are sitting ducks for people who are going to have nefarious aims. It is an invitation for money laundering now because of the vast amount of cash that is circulated. It impacts so many legitimate businesses, real estate, insurance, attorneys, accountings, who get caught up. We already heard reference to what happened from Mr. Stivers with his constituent in Ohio, a business that provides gardening supplies that risk losing their bank account. It's time for us to address this inconsistency. It's time for us to pass again the Safe Banking Act, and it's time for us to move forward with legalization on the federal level with the MORE Act, which will resolve these inconsistencies once and for all, give the American public what they want, they repeatedly vote for across the country, unleash this state legal business to be able to, for its full potential, for health, the economic, and a cry for racial justice. I appreciate us being at this point for a critical first step along the tortuous path to full legalization, which I'm confident will happen this Congress, and not a moment too soon. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Oregon yields back. The gentleman from Colorado reserves.
May I inquire of the chair how much time I have remaining?
The gentleman from North Carolina has 5 minutes remaining.
5 minutes remaining?
5 minutes remaining.
Okay. I yield to my colleague for a minute and a half. I yield to my colleague, Mr. Gaetz of Florida, for a minute and a half.
The gentleman is recognized for a minute and a half.
I thank the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee for yielding. I rise in support of the Safe Banking Act, which I am honored to introduce with my colleagues, Mr. Joyce, Mr. Perlmutter, Mr. Blumenauer, and others. And it seems the war on drugs is a lot like so many of the other forever wars that this Congress confronts, deeply unpopular in all parts of the country except Washington, D.C. And so I commend the majority party for bringing this bill to the floor and allowing businesses who serve particularly medical marijuana patients the opportunity to access the U.S. financial system. There's an important part of this legislation that bears note. With the Safe Banking Act, we will have unprecedented opportunity for research and collaboration, which did not exist previously, which doesn't exist now. There are so many universities, medical centers, other research institutions that would like to partner with and work alongside marijuana businesses with the opportunity to improve health outcomes for patients, to bring relief to people who badly need it. And I would implore my colleagues in the majority party, reach out to President Biden, as I did to President Trump. Ask him to take executive action to remove marijuana from the list of Schedule I drugs so that we can accelerate marijuana reform for the benefit of our fellow Americans and those who are in need and in pain and are counting on us. I thank the gentleman and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Colorado.
I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close, and I understand.
If I could,
sure.
I'd say to the gentleman, I'd like unanimous consent to enter into the record the endorsements for the Safe Banking Act, including the American Bankers Association, the American Council of Independent Laboratories, the American Council of Life Insurers, the American Financial Services Association, the American Land Title Association, the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, the Arizona Dispensaries Association, the California Cannabis Industry Association, it goes on forever, National Armored Car Association. I'm not going to list all these. There's about 50 different endorsements, and I'd ask unanimous consent to be able to enter them into.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Look, I want to repeat this from my earlier remarks. This bill represents one of the biggest changes to U.S. drug policy. If we want banks to provide services risk-free, then we should do it thoughtfully and address the legality of cannabis, instead of this workaround, which this bill represents a yeoman's task of a legal framework so that cannabis in those legalized states, so that cannabis can be legally banked. But that is not a holistic approach to this issue, nor should it be the Financial Services Committee leading the debate, which we've had one hearing on in the last 3 years in this committee. Actually, you could say probably one hearing in the last decade on the Financial Services Committee, and yet we have this bill, which frankly on its face is a very well-balanced bill to fix a problem, a glaring problem that's happening across the country. And so this bill will legalize the banking of a federally illegal product. And I'm sure the irony of this is not at all lost on the American public. The drug cartels, frankly, are keen to this, and other bad actors are keen to this, and they'll attempt to take advantage of this if this is not well implemented, if it's not thoughtfully implemented, especially if those things are not the case. And so no matter how we spin what is happening right now, we currently have a crisis at the southern border, and human trafficking is certainly a part of that. A desire to come to the United States is certainly a part of that. And the movement of illegal drugs into the United States is certainly a part of that. This doesn't help with that crisis at the southern border. But again, we're the House Financial Services Committee. We're not the Homeland Security Committee. We're not the Appropriations Committee. So we can't fix all things within our jurisdiction. Let me close with this. And while I do not support this bill because it represents a workaround to a much bigger debate that we need to have in the United States, and that is whether or not cannabis should remain a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act. This fact is the bigger issue that I think this Congress should wrestle with, and I would welcome it. And in fact, I think we can have a much more nuanced debate here. But I do want to close by thanking my colleagues for creating a very thoughtful product this legislative text is much improved upon from where it was originally. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Mr. Perlmutter, for leading that conversation and leading that set of negotiations, which has taken years to produce this product. It is strong legislative text. It is a strong legal framework. Even though I've pointed out a number of its deficiencies and challenges, I do see on its face how this would resolve a huge problem in a large number of states. I understand that, and I'm inviting the larger discussion about cannabis as well, and I think we need to have that as well. But I do want to thank my colleague, Mr. Perlmutter, for his leadership there, and I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Stivers, Mr. Davidson, Mr. Joyce, as well on our side of the aisle for engaging in that, as well as Mr. Lukemeyer and Mr. Barr, that dealt with particular issues in their states and our jurisdiction as well. With that, I urge my colleagues to vote no, but understand if they do vote yes, and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from North Carolina. And to his point, there is a broader discussion that has to take place, but the purpose of this bill is a public safety purpose. It is a purpose to get people from being killed, from being robbed, from being assaulted. And that is within the financial services arena, because at this point, the cannabis industry and the people that serve it in one way or another have to deal in cash, which attracts, it really creates the potential for the robberies, for the murders, for the assaults. And so we've been able to gather a lot of support from this. I mentioned the bankers and the credit unions and the insurance industry, the cannabis industry, obviously, the real estate industry, the armored cars, law enforcement. Law enforcement is supportive of this. The minority cannabis industry. We have the National Treasurers Association, 21 governors, attorneys general, because they know this is a public safety matter. And we really need to address it. We have been working on it for some time, as the gentleman from North Carolina has mentioned. But we need to get this to the Senate. They need to take whatever tack they want to take, but we've got to make our communities safer, these businesses safer. Safe Banking Act is about public safety. Our bill is narrowly tailored to get cash off the streets and improve public safety. I want to thank my lead co-sponsors on this bill, Representatives Velasquez, Stivers, and Davidson, and all my colleagues who have listened to me talk about the need to address this problem for the last 8 years. I also want to thank the staff of the Financial Services Committee, the staff from my lead co-sponsors, and my own staff who put so much time into this bill. I urge all my colleagues to vote yes on the Safe Banking Act, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Colorado yields back. All time is expired or yielded back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1996 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman from Montana.
I request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed.